Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. The title of this podcast is Ufology as First World Demireality. First, let me explain two of those terms. First, ufology, the study of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Yes. Demireality, a term we have discussed here several times before. That was Roy Bhaskar's translation of the word Maya from the original Sanskrit. He can also translate it as splitting or disunity or anything along those lines. But I think in this case, the word illusion, literally Maya, illusion, is the best translation, and you'll see what I mean as I go through the topic. So, let's begin. This is going to be a really interesting one for those of you that have a vivid imagination, but please don't take what I am saying seriously, meaning don't take what I am saying as fact. It is pure illusion, or maybe even a better word would be delusion, pure delusion. Okay. Ufology, the study of UFOs, can be a kind of neutral idea. People trying to find out if there are these unidentified flying objects. And if somebody would ask me that question, I would say, I have no idea. That would be my response. And I think that is the only logical response, because I would not say no. Because how would I be able to determine that? I would not say yes, because then I would need to provide evidence for it. And I have no evidence for it. So I think that I don't know. It's the most logical response to the question, what do you think about UFOs? Unidentified flying objects. There are different degrees of ufology, and what I will be talking about here is the most extreme degree imaginable. As a sociologist of religion, I have studied this movement. It is a fascinating, if crazy, movement to explore. So if you have the stomach for it, I would suggest that you follow it, perhaps occasionally watch some episodes of Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you have Sirius XM, you can get it there. Many local radio stations also carry it. It's an overnight talk show. It is also available on YouTube, but not the full program, only portions of it. In any event, watch that show, and many of the episodes of that show are devoted to this extreme variant of ufology. You'll see what I mean. Alien abductions. Yes, there are people who believe in them, that human beings are actually being abducted by extraterrestrials. Now, the explanation for that, meaning the reason that these extreme ufologists give for these alien abductions varies. There is no consistency in terms of explaining why it is that these beings are doing this. But I will give you a few possibilities. And these are not from me. These are from them. Okay, so don't think that I am expressing my own views. I am not. I think this is real craziness. But there are people who will believe in it. And so it may be useful to understand it as a type of first world demi-reality, and as an example of the contradictions of capitalism. The fact that so many first worlders would have committed themselves to such complete nonsense is unimaginable to me. I can't understand it. Most people involved in the ufology movement, let's broaden that. Most people involved in the paranormal in general, which includes ufology, are people on the far right wing. That should not be surprising, because what you're talking about are right-wing conspiracy theories. Now, are there left-wing conspiracy theories? Yeah, some, but not as many as on the right. There are tons of right-wing conspiracy theories. The best known, perhaps, is the famous Illuminati conspiracy, which is most closely identified with Nazi Germany, where Adolf Hitler believed that the Illuminati were Jews, and they were trying to take over the world and establish a world government. That's what Hitler believed, or at least what he said he believed, and I have no reason to think he was lying. So again, the majority, not all, but the majority of conspiracy theories come from the far right, and ufology is no exception. Alien abductions are no exception. But when you've listened to these people talk about this stuff in such a matter-of-fact way, you begin to wonder, are these people sane? Now, I am not qualified to judge the sanity of people. I am not a psychotherapist. But still, when I watch this stuff, I think that myself. Are these people sane? Now, I can't answer that question, but the thought crosses my mind. I think it would cross the minds of most rational people, because what they're saying is just so completely crazy that it simply stretches the imagination beyond recognition. Let's start with some of the basic ideas. First, that there are extraterrestrials who, for some reason, have an interest in human beings and who are abducting them, meaning taking them aboard their spacecrafts. The most common being that is described in these cases of alien abduction is the famous gray alien. If you've ever seen pictures of communion, for example, you know what I'm talking about. They have these flat gray faces, these very thin eyes, kind of no nose, a slit for a mouth, obviously not a human-like face. And generally, they tend to be rather short. There are some people who say there are two types of gray aliens: the masters and the servants. The masters are intelligent life forms, intelligent beings, sentient beings. The servants are like, I guess, androids, but they kind of look like the tall gray aliens, except, well, they're short. And in one way or another, whether the tall grays, commonly they're called grays, or the short grays, kidnap people from their homes, from their cars, from their places of work. Are you scared yet? And bring them aboard their spacecraft. Why? Now it starts to get really interesting. There are different explanations as to why they do it. One, they are collecting eggs and sperm from human beings. Why? Well, the idea is that at some point, there will be some type of a global Holocaust on the planet Earth. And so that what these extraterrestrials are doing, let's just call them ETs, is to collect these sperms and eggs and to create hybrids of themselves and human beings. So that after we Earthlings, we Earth humans, wipe ourselves out, these hybrids will replace us. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Why anybody would believe anything like that is beyond me. It's beyond me. I mean, I've heard these stories. When people have told me these things, I experienced this. My first thought is, it sounds to me like you had a bad dream, or it sounds to me like you were having a hallucination. But that's not what they think. They genuinely believe that they were kidnapped by ETs, by aliens, and taken aboard spacecraft. Some of them have more ulterior ideas in mind, and they think that that we humans contain a substance within us which is needed by these aliens. If not, these aliens will die. So they need to capture human beings to extract that substance. And then they use that substance, I'm not sure how, whether by transfusion, by drinking, or some other way, enema, to survive, to ensure their own survival. Basically, that's the idea behind it. Really crazy stuff. As if I needed to tell you it was crazy. Then you have some people who believe that the reason why these aliens are kidnapping us, are abducting us, alien abductions, or other names that people use for them, is because they want to bring these beings back to their planets to use as pets. Yes, I once heard a person on Coast to Coast AM, only once, but still, who said that that's why they're doing it, because they want to bring human beings back to their planets so that people can use them as pets. That reminds me a bit of an old Twilight Zone episode. I'm not sure if you've seen Twilight Zone, you might remember the one I'm talking about. But it obviously is not real, and yet to these people it is. Strange, even a stranger aspect to this, as if you could imagine that there was one. I have seen some of these alleged abductees or contactees, different people use different terms for them, who say that they are regularly abducted aboard these spacecraft and they are taught things. They're taught special knowledge. They're taught special languages, both written and spoken. And when you watch these YouTube videos, and I suggest maybe you try to watch them if you have a stomach for them, or maybe if you have a good sense of humor and don't take it seriously, they will actually start speaking these languages. To me, it sounds rather similar to glossolalia, the Pentecostal practice of speaking in tongues. But then there is also a written script, and there are varieties that the script takes, but most of them look maybe something like Egyptian hieroglyphics. And again, their argument is that they are teaching us this stuff for a reason. because mankind, to them, is undergoing a great transition, they say. And there are certain people, but only certain people, I guess you and I are not among them, well, maybe you and not me, who are among the chosen ones. Those people are the ones who will lead humanity to the new future. Basically, in effect, a new race of humans. Yeah, that's what they say. And that in order to do that, they need to educate certain people. And that those people will, in effect, be the guides to the rest of humanity to take us along the path to the next stage of human development. If that doesn't sound weird to you, then nothing will. Let me give you another permutation of this thing, which is also equally odd, if not odder. There are some people who claim that, not that there's abductions, although it's close to abductions, but that the US government in particular, but also in some cases other governments as well, have these treaties with ETs. And these ETs are kept in secret facilities, usually in the dreaded Area 51. And deep underground, these aliens live, and they work with humans in developing spacecraft. And so, the reason why there has been such rapid technological development in recent years has been because human beings have been learning this technology from these ETs. Well, of course. What other explanation could there possibly be? The ETs are teaching us. That's why we know these things. And pretty soon, we humans will be able to travel interdimensionally. Some people say that we can do that already, and that the US government, for example, has a special program of secret astronauts who travel to other dimensions, that there are certain portals, like black holes maybe, which transport a spacecraft from this dimension to another one. Other people say that stars are used as portals, and that in effect a spacecraft will orbit around a planet, a star, very rapidly, and through this process be transported to another dimension. Okay. Next time I see one, I'll tell you. But it's totally odd stuff that only a crazy person, in my opinion, would believe in. And yet, there are a lot of such people around. I have listened to episode upon episode of this show, Coast to Coast, where people call in. Now, I would assume that some of them are hoaxers, but not all of them appear to be hoaxers. Some of them appear to be totally sincere, that they have experienced these things themselves. They have seen these ETs. They have visited these underground facilities, or they have been abducted directly onto spacecraft. Yeah. And taught these weird languages, or had their sperm or egg removed so it could be used in making hybrids. Sounds perfectly logical to me. And the result of that is that we have an entire counterculture And it really is a counterculture of ufology, which focuses upon alien abduction, but includes a lot more than that. I call it the alien abduction counterculture. Now, we have many countercultures in the world. In the US, the term counterculture originated in reference to the hippies, but there are other countercultures as well. The outlaw bikers, for example, who seem to have a fetish for Harley Davidsons. They can be called a counterculture too. They often get tattoos all over their bodies. There are a lot of countercultures. Countercultures have always been with us. They tend to attract the relatively young, but not exclusively. Many of these people who show up on Coast to Coast AM are not that young. Some of them are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or even older. And they all claim either that they have been abducted by aliens, that they have visited these secret underground bases where aliens and humans have treaties of partnership, or something else. Commonly, you will see the meme repeated that there are some good species, some good ETs, and some bad ETs. And the good ETs are working with governments around the world to protect us from the bad ETs. The bad ETs would like to do a lot of harm to us, but the good ETs are trying to save us. First of all, that makes no sense. I mean, if you have creatures who are capable of traveling that fast at super light speeds or through dimensions, what could stop them from doing damage to the Earth? And to the best of my knowledge, the Earth is still here. To the best of my knowledge, nothing has happened to us yet. That would seem to lead, at least me, to the conclusion that these ideas are nothing but insanity. And yet, there are many people who believe in them. I could go on and on giving you story after story, but again, I would suggest that you watch Coast to Coast AM, or that you go to YouTube and watch the podcasts of Linda Moulton Howe. She talks about many of the same kinds of things. And she appears to believe in at least some of them. Maybe not all, but some of them. And it's very strange. Another person, Whitley Strieber. Just Google Whitley Strieber. He has his own website. He talks about all the same kinds of things that I just mentioned. And he has a forum that you can join for money, not much, but money. And then people go on those forums and they talk about their experiences. I actually joined, not because I believe in that kind of nonsense, but just to see what it was. And it's exactly what I just said. It's these crazy people talking about alien abductions, secret laboratories, hybrids, whatever. And they really believe this, or at least many of them do. So the question that I ask is, why? Why? Rather than laughing at these people, I don't like laughing at people. That's not very respectful. But it's hard to talk about this stuff without treating it somewhat humorously. I think you probably would agree with that, unless you are a true believer. Why do people believe in this ufology lore that we've talked about today. Why accept it? I mean, there are a lot of other things that one can spend one's time in, like the kinds of podcasts I make, for example. Like, for example, worrying about the Israeli war in Gaza. That's something I think is worthwhile, focusing on that. At least that's real. There are photographs, there are movies of these things going on right now. The other stuff is pure imagination. It's largely based on rumor. Now, once in a while, you will get a supposed photograph of an ET, but generally the photograph is very hazy. That tells me that most likely it's fabricated by somebody who has Photoshop but doesn't know how to use it well. That's my conclusion. Maybe I'm wrong. So again, why believe in this? Why? Why? And why predominantly do people on the far right believe in this? Now, I'm not painting everyone with one brush. I'm certainly not saying that everyone on the far right believes in this crap. Not at all. But a lot of people on the far right do. A lot. A lot of MAGA people do, because I've heard them talk about it. There is an overlap between this extreme ufology counterculture and MAGA. There have been interviews with them. I have heard those interviews, and it's amazing the kinds of things that these rednecks or people believe in. Why? Why? Well, alienation. Alienation. Simple, well, maybe not so simple, but alienation. There is so much alienation in the Western world where people feel like, I don't know who to trust. And for good reason. A lot of people that may have been assumed to be trustworthy were later found out to be anything but that. I mean, I can even go back to my childhood and think about Jack Kennedy. Most people, didn't matter whether you were a Democrat or Republican, an American or a citizen of some other country, most people liked Jack. He was globally liked. When his wife Jackie left him, I think it was less than a year after he died, I know I was really angry at Jackie. I thought, how could Jackie do that to Jack? And then I find out, well, we all find out, that meanwhile, even as there appeared to be this Romeo and Juliet romance going on between Jack and Jackie, Jack was a philanderer. He was going out having affairs with Marilyn Monroe. When he got tired of her, he would pass her down the line to Bobby Kennedy, and sometimes Teddy Kennedy would get her, or somebody else. Literally, Jack Kennedy had one affair after the other. So when you hear something like this about somebody that you had faith in, somebody that you actually believed was honest, was trustworthy, it, at least for me, it weakens my belief in the honesty of people. Now, I was never a lover of Tricky Dick, Richard Nixon. I never could care. I never liked him at all. But that's because I didn't like his policies. It had nothing to do with him personally, although he certainly was not the most lovable person on God's green earth. But Richard Nixon, of course, is largely these days associated with Watergate. But in the early years of his presidency, nobody knew that. No one knew about the burglars that broke in and stole documents from the Democratic National Committee. Then ultimately, under pressure, when Richard Nixon knew that he was really in serious trouble, he stepped down. He resigned as President of the United States. I remember that very well, as if it were yesterday, but I'm an old man. But I vividly remember the resignation of Nixon. I also remember the congressional hearings which preceded that resignation. So we have had so many people, that's just a couple of them, trustworthy individuals, people that most individuals thought were worthy of their admiration, only to find out that they were not. So one by one, as these people have come before us, it's easy to get alienated, to lose one's faith in the system, and to begin believing in an Illuminati conspiracy. After all, why is the world so messed up? It must be because of an Illuminati. And this brings it back to the topic. David Icke, who was an admitted paranoid schizophrenic, claims that these Illuminati are actually reptoid aliens, reptiles, that almost every president of the United States, all the royals in Britain, are actually reptiles, but they have the ability to put on a secret skin to cover their reptilian surface, to make themselves look like they're humans. But then, when nobody's looking, they take off that secret human skin and they look like reptiles again. And again, there are alleged photos of people transforming, maybe transmuting is a better word, from reptiles into apparent humans, and from apparent humans back into reptiles. Why believe in such complete and total BS? I mean, I cannot conceive, no matter how alienated I might be, and there have been moments in my life when I have certainly felt alienated, as I think all of us have throughout our lives. But I have never been tempted to believe in alien abductions, or to think that that aliens were in these secret laboratories under the surface of the earth, working with human scientists to develop various spaceships that could be used by humans to travel at above light speeds or interdimensionally. That thought simply never crossed my mind. It never did. And yet, it apparently does cross the mind of many people in the ufology counterculture. So, my point in making this weird video, and I realize it's weird, is as a practical demonstration, maybe a practical illustration of demi-reality, of the extremes to which demi-reality can get. And this is certainly an extreme. I mean, the outlaw biker culture may be strange, but it's not insane. The hippies were strange, but they were not insane. The beatniks of the 1950s may have seemed strange to some people, but not insane. But anybody who believes in this extreme ufology counterculture, in my opinion, is insane. And I would challenge anyone to say otherwise. Now, by saying insane, I am doing that for a very specific reason. Because insanity is not a psychiatric diagnosis. It used to be, but not anymore. Insanity is a legal term, like not guilty by reason of insanity, but it's not a psychiatric diagnosis. So if I say that people who believe in this extreme ufology counterculture are insane, I am not diagnosing them. I'm just saying that they appear to me to be totally out of their mind. And again, saying totally out of their mind is also not a diagnosis. It's simply a description of my impression when I look at these people, what they believe, and what they say, especially on the shows of Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, and George Norrie. They do seem insane to me, or many of them do. Do all of them? No. Some of the guests are rational people who simply talk about science, but they are few and far between. The majority of them are really weird. Some of them believe that these extraterrestrials communicate with humans through crop circles, if you know what they are. They're mostly in the UK. They're like these circular patterns that appear on the grass. And people have tried to interpret them. Now, why they mostly appear in the UK is anyone's guess. But to some people in the extreme ufology counterculture, those crop circles are messages from ETs to us. To us. One thing to keep in mind is that I have listened to many programs on crop circles and ETs, and generally the guest will make a prediction that something is going to happen on a certain date. That date passes by, and it appears as though people simply forget. So people who are in this lunatic, far right-wing ufology counterculture would appear, like many of us, perhaps, to have short memories. So they are lulled into believing in this silliness. Silliness is kind of an understatement. And then when it doesn't happen, they just forget about it and they move on to something else. Okay, so that's basically all I wanted to discuss. What I'm trying to do is to figure out some way of intelligently ending this podcast, but I can't think of any, so I will just say, for now, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.